perfectly clear, I'm the new vice chair.
Yes, you are. That's right. But you would be a good chair as well.
I'm sure you would say so. See, Dave, you skip one meeting and look what you miss.
I know. It's horrible. Oh, well. I was having more fun on top of the mountain.
I bet you probably were.
It's been a fun couple months.
Hey, Scott, you just look totally relaxed, you know?
You know, Pete, I have, let's see, just outside the picture frame is a bottle of scotch, and
Yeah, well, none of us believe that, Scott.
I'm going to sit here and keep my mouth shut. You have any idea how hard that's going to be?
Yep.
Yep.
Emily, you let me know when you think we can get started. I think you might be muted. You might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Emily, I think you
Okay.
unmuted me when you thought you were, or I think you muted me when you were unmuting yourself.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
It looks like Steve is still muted.
Yep.
I'm here.
All right.
And Paul Christensen is still muted.
Right.
You guys should have the ability to mute and unmute.
Yes.
Let me just make sure the settings are.
That was true a moment ago for me, Emily.
Okay. It looks like we have a caller tonight ending in 0486. You would be so kind as to introduce yourself for the record.
They're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, 0486. What's your name?
It's Steve Diglio. I'm having trouble with my computer that normally has the video.
Okay, cool. I knew the number looked familiar. Cool. I think we can go ahead and get started, Pete.
Okay. Good evening, all, and welcome to the Town of Williston Development Review Board for Tuesday, August 25th, 2020. We'll start with the remote public meeting announcement. I, Peter Kelly, as chair of the Williston Development Review Board, find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe or participate in this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by video conference and telephone through Zoom. All members of the DRB and the public can communicate and participate in real time during this meeting through Zoom. Planning staff will provide instructions for public participation using Zoom before the hearings are opened. B, providing public notice of instructions for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for assessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting on Zoom with a computer, smartphone, or regular telephone in our posted meeting agenda. Instructions have also been provided on the town website at www.town.williston.gov. williston.vt.us. Click on Public Records and Documents, then go to Agendas and Minutes, and then navigate to the desired meeting date. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please use the chat feature within Zoom or call Emily at 802-878-6704, extension 3. Item D, continuing the meeting if necessary. In the event the public is unable to access this meeting, it will be continued to September 22, 2020. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance of all DRB members participating in this meeting. David Turner.
Here.
Scott Riley.
Here.
Steve Lambrecht.
Here.
John Hemmelgarn.
Present.
Paul Christensen.
Here.
Okay, thank you. The next order of business is the public forum. Is there anyone participating in tonight's meeting that would like to bring up anything that's not on the agenda?
You can press the raise hand button, which is *9 on the telephone for the telephone participants, or comment in the chat if you would like to speak.
Okay, hearing none. We're now going to go into agenda item number 2, which is the public hearing. We have 2 items on the agenda for tonight. DP 21-01, Next Generation, care of KAS Consulting. It's a discretionary permit to change the use of an existing office space to a childcare center. And also DP 10-34.4. This was previously numbered DP 21-02. It's the Chittenden Solid Waste District. It's a request for an expansion of the organics facility on Redmond Road. So first up is DP 21-01. Who's up with that for staff, Emily?
That'll be me.
Okay.
And before I get going, just a quick introduction for the public participants. On your toolbar, you'll see a mute symbol and a start video symbol. Turning your video on is optional. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. Use the chat box or press the raise hand button if you would like to speak. Telephone participants, press *6 to mute or unmute and *9 to raise hand. To optimize the view during the screen share, you can switch between gallery view and speaker view. When you see the green toolbar at the top of your screen, click View Options, and side by side, you'll get a adjuster slider where you can balance the screen share and the video participants. If you have bad internet connection or your speaker isn't working well, you can join by using your telephone. There's an arrow next to the microphone symbol. Click Leave Computer Audio, and it'll give you the prompt on how to use your telephone as your speaker and microphone. Without further ado, I will begin with my staff report. So this is a request for a discretionary permit to add 2 fenced-in play areas with a gazebo and small storage shed to an existing commercial property. The property is located at 135 Talcott Road. It's developed with a 3,000 square foot building, 32 parking spaces, sidewalks, utilities, and other appurtenances. The change of use to a daycare is approvable administratively. This is a commercial property. It will remain commercial. It's accessed onto a town road, Talcott Road. It's located in the mixed-use commercial zoning district. It is subject to design review, but not conservation review. Staff is recommending approval of this discretionary permit, and the DRB may choose to add specific conditions for bicycle parking, end of trip facilities, landscaping, and design review. So some project history. This lot was created in 1987. It was originally developed in 89 as North Country Landscaping. They closed in the mid 2000s, and this site has been various commercial uses since. The Conservation Commission did not review this project. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee did on August 18th. Their memo is included as conditions of approval. Public Works and Fire also reviewed this application, and their recommendations are included. The Public Works Department did have some comments on sewer allocation and sewer service lines. The applicant has been in communication with them. No comment letters were received at the time of mail out, and I have not received any comment letters as of today. This property is located in the mixed-use residential zoning district, where child daycare services is an allowed use. The fenced play areas and gazebo and sheds comply with the dimensional standards of the setbacks and the height limit of 36 feet. Outdoor sales and storage are not proposed nor permitted in this district. Staff finds that the corralling of children in a fenced play area is not considered outdoor storage. Development pattern, the applicant is not proposing a redevelopment of the subject parcel. Therefore, the development pattern standards of 38.5 do not apply. These standards are geared towards changing auto-oriented development to a pedestrian-oriented mixed-use type pattern, which leads into the vested rights, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. This parcel was approved over 30 years ago, so they're vested in their site plan. And the DRB's power to correct nonconformities is limited to requiring work that is reasonably proportional to the scale of the development. Staff finds that the DRB does not have this power over the application because no major site changes are proposed to the primary structure, access, or parking. They're proposing small outdoor play areas and gazebos, which are minor in nature. And there could be some things that would have to change about this site in order to comply with Chapter 38 and Chapter 22 if this property were to be significantly redeveloped in the future. Access, the parcel has 2 curb cuts onto Talcott Road, and they are not proposing changes to access. Off-street parking and loading, the site has 32 parking spaces, 2 of which are ADA, and they're not changing the parking lot. The application doesn't identify short or long-term bicycle spaces. Those will need to be shown on the final plans. For example, an inverted U-rack for short-term bicycle parking, and then long-term parking somewhere else on the site or building for employees. The DRB must decide if an end-of-trip facility should be required and may need to draft a condition of approval. What follows is the parking table. So 19 spaces would be required today, but they have that existing parking lot with 32 spaces. The property is served by municipal water and sewer, and the applicant has been in conversation with Public Works. Their memo is included as a condition of approval. Maintenance, the site plan and narrative identify snow storage and solid waste in compliance with Chapter 16. The applicant is proposing residential grade totes that will be stored behind the building. Design review. The proposed gazebos are wooden timber frame structures. The wood will be stained a natural honey color, and the corrugated metal roof will be green, though the spec photos shown in the application materials show an unpainted metal. The proposed fence will be black coated chain link fence. The 2 small sheds associated, there will be 2 small sheds associated with each gazebo to store equipment. They'll be stained a similar color with a similar matching green roof. The HAC only provided one specific recommendation in reference to 2252, consider sliding ice and snow. Final plans shall specify snow guards or other physical feature to prevent snow from sliding off the roof and or to keep the entrance and exit gabled ends of the gazebo for the entrance and exit. This way, like if snow comes down on the sides, there isn't a person walking underneath it, or the snow is prevented from sliding off. Landscaping, the site plan identifies a 9-foot type 3 buffer on the north, south, and western property lines, but it doesn't include a planting schedule. The existing forested area to the south end will meet the landscaping requirement. The DRB must decide if a landscape buffer should be planted along that north and western property lines. It may choose to add a condition of approval. Again, going back to the vested in the existing site plan, if the project they're proposing, the DRB needs to decide if that rises to the level of needing additional landscaping. Street trees are existing and no changes are proposed. Similarly, no changes are proposed to outdoor lighting, and the sign can be approved administratively. What follows are findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So who is present from the applicants?
I'm Steve Digley. I'm the engineer for the applicant. Sarah LeBlanc is also available, and David LeBlanc.
Great. Welcome. Sarah and David, are you the operators or are you the owner of the building?
Operators.
Operators, okay. Okay, at this point, we turn it over to you to fill in any blanks that you think that staff might not have covered, or any other clarifications that you feel are relevant at this point.
I guess I'll start. This is a relatively minor change to an existing facility. My clients are leasing this building, so they're already putting a decent investment into changing the use. When it comes to the landscaping, there is lots of landscaping available on this property, and most of it's mature. The only change we were proposing was to put some around the sign to come in compliance with the sign requirements in the zoning. And beyond that, I mean, we are looking to do some minor changes to the wastewater system just so to add another connection in. But I mean, this is, in my general opinion, this is a relatively minor project, and we're trying to keep it that way as best we can. But still obviously meet the town requirements.
Okay. Sarah or David, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think we do.
Okay. Steve, are you all set before I turn it over to the board for some questions?
Yep.
Okay. So DRB, any questions of the applicant?
I have a question around the hours of operation.
We will be, so our normal hours are 7 to 5, but right now during COVID time, we've sort of reduced hours from 7:30 to 4:30.
This is Steve Lambrecht. I have two questions. Number of children that will be served in the facility. What's your max license capacity?
The proposal is for 56 children max.
And also presumably there's going to be some kind of play sets or something in the fenced in area as well. Is that true?
Correct. You go ahead, Dave.
We're a nature-based program, so anything you see inside the fenced-in area would be like a log that kids can crawl over, a sand area. I'm sorry?
Stumps, all natural.
Yeah, stumps and all natural materials. No big play structures like you'd see at the elementary school. It doesn't fit into our teaching philosophies. You may see a plastic slide be the only real commercial piece for safety only. You know, we lay it against the hill, so it's a natural conformity.
Thank
If
you.
that answers.
Any other questions from the DRB?
Yes, this is John. I was wondering about any revisions you're making to bathrooms and whatnot to accommodate those the little ones.
They will be adding another bathroom and a kitchen area. The kitchen area is mostly for cleanup. They're not really going to be making meals here for the kids. But they will be adding a bathroom area, and part of that is to make sure they can keep groups separated as well. And that's part of the reason why we need to add another exterior connection for the sewer, is to accommodate the additional kitchen and bathroom that they'll be adding.
Are you opposed to adding a end of trip facility for bicycle riders?
Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, so an end of trip facility would be like a bathroom with a shower so employees could change and have a little locker room space if they bike to work where they can freshen up.
There's one currently there. The main bathroom has a shower already in place.
Sounds like they have an end of trip facility there, Emily.
Sounds good. Yeah, so final plans should identify that shower in the plan set.
Okay.
I'm done, Pete.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else?
This is Dave. Just one quick question on the parking lot. I know you're not proposing any changes there. Are there lights in that parking lot now?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, there's lights on posts along, and I believe they're downcast. I haven't been there at night, but yeah, there's lights on post.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, I drive by there a lot at night, and I can't say that I've ever been blinded by the lights as I go by.
Perfect.
Christensen, one question. Are there sprinkler systems in the building for the kids? Just out of curiosity.
There's currently not sprinklers, and I don't believe it's a requirement for this facility. I think there's the way the exits are set up, it would not be needed.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Riley, any questions?
All set. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the DRB with any other questions? Anyone on the call that would like to ask a general question about this application? Okay, one last chance for the applicant. Is there anything you want to add before we close this hearing?
Do you feel you have enough information from us? It seems like there's no questions. I mean, I think I think Emily's done a great job summarizing everything.
Yeah, Steve, this is pretty straightforward. Thanks for that question. If there's a whole bunch of questions, then that means there's a whole bunch of confusion, and the lack of interaction with you folks is a good sign here.
Great.
Okay. So I am going to close DP 21-01 at 7:24. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is DP 10-34.4, the Chittenden Solid Waste District. And which staff member has that one?
I'll be taking this one, Pete.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you'd like to get the names and addresses of the applicants before I start.
Yes. Who was here? Thank you. Who was here on the Zoom call from the applicant?
You have Josh Tyler from the Chittenden Solid Waste District, Director of Operations. Dan Goosen from the Chittenden Solid Waste District. He is the Director of our composting facility. And Janine McCrum from the Chittenden Solid Waste District, and she's leading our permitting charge.
Great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Now, in the previous application, I did not ask for addresses. Matt, are you okay? Matt and Emily, are you okay with that?
If
How to find
somebody,
them.
Yeah, you've had communication with them, so yeah, okay.
yeah, these folks are at.
Take it away.
All right, so we're at 1021 Redmond Road. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen while I work through the staff report, and then I'll unshare when I'm finished up. Okay. So this is a discretionary permit application. It is to expand the existing organics diversion facility, or ODF, colloquially known as the compost facility at Chittenden Solid Waste at 1021 Redmond Road. We are in the industrial zoning district east. And the property is currently developed with a composting facility operated by the landowner, CSWD. And the purpose of the proposed expansion is to meet the increased influx of materials that are anticipated from the implementation of Act 148, Vermont's added requirements for more and more users to divert compostable materials from the waste stream. A couple of things that we're going to be looking at as it relates to the bylaw tonight: pre-existing non-conforming uses, exemptions from permits related to both those pre-existing uses and CSWD's status, access to the site, potential hazards and nuisances. You'll see some comment letters related to potential for odor and other impacts related to our nuisance chapter in the bylaw. Landscape buffers, some recommendations from staff there. Recommendations related to changes to the signage on the site, street trees along Redmond Road. Conservation areas, you'll see in the staff report and in the Conservation Commission's memo, some discussion of significant wildlife habitat area. Watershed health, discussion of a buffer to a 50-foot buffer to an unnamed stream on the site, and some discussion of the standards of the Industrial East zoning district. Staff's recommendation tonight is that the DRB take public testimony and testimony from the applicant and staff and close the hearing, deliberate this evening, and the recommendation from staff is for approval. So this is the first time the DRB is hearing this proposal. We have had a number of other DRB approvals in the last few years on this site, including the initial development of the facility, the expansion of some buildings on the site, the addition of a 12 by 24 foot greenhouse, construction of stormwater improvements on the site, and a administrative permit and zoning administrator's opinion related to the sand and gravel extraction operation that continues on the site. The Conservation Commission did review this project. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee did not, because it's not within their purview. And the Conservation Commission is providing some recommendations related to watershed protection, erosion protection, and sediment control planning, and especially regarding making sure the final plans include information about the extent and reclamation plan for the gravel mining operation ongoing on the property. We did also circulate this project for review by Public Works, Police, and Fire. And we do have memos from Public Works and Fire included in the package with some notes and some recommendations that their concerns be included in the draft conditions of approval. we did receive, I believe I have a Public Works memo on this. We're saying that we didn't, but I think we've uploaded it since. We did receive one public comment letter at the time of the mail out of this application, which was August 20th. We did receive a second public comment email later on, not in time to send out in the mailing, but that is on the website, and I can screen share it if there's a question about it. So as I said, we're in the Industrial Zoning District East. We have a proposed use related to waste management and remediation services. This is an allowed use in the Industrial East Zoning District. We also have mining and quarrying, which is an allowed use. We have wholesale trade, which is not an allowed use, but this project does qualify as a partially exempted development as related to the nature of the applicant being CSWD, essentially treated as a municipality under the eyes of our bylaw. Similarly for retail trade. I would also suggest that although we don't have sort of the typical percentage of building size calculation to make here because the compost facility is a large outdoor operation, one might think of those retailing operations as accessory to the primary purpose of the site, which is the production of these materials. We do have outdoor sales and storage related to the compost facility. We, again, don't generally allow that in this district, but it is part of a regional solid waste management facility operated under provisions of state law that qualify it for a partial exemption from Williston's bylaws. We also have an ongoing gravel mining operation on the subject property. Those of you who have been in town for some time may recall that this site was the subject of very, very lengthy takings litigation related to CSWD and the original owners of the site, Heinsberg Sand and Gravel. Part of that settlement does allow for Heinsberg Sand and Gravel to continue to mine sand and gravel from the site. And that's why that operation continues on the site. In 2018, I was approached by staff from CSWD in my role as zoning administrator to attempt to clarify the town's position as it related to sand and gravel mining on the site. And I did issue a determination letter and a follow-up administrative permit documenting that the town was aware that the sand and gravel mining was occurring and had been occurring on the site since at least 1972. Prior to the town's establishment of any rules or requirements for permits for that type of operation in this part of town. And I'll just editorialize a little bit. The evidence that was presented to me were extraction and sales logs that had been maintained by the company beginning in the year 1972 that showed the volumes of material that had been extracted and sold off the site. I think it was month to month. Certainly I had totals for every year showing that continuation of the operation. And I did note the ability of the applicant to continue that non-conforming use on the property. When I issued the permit later on in 2018, I did condition it that future applications for development on this site would need to include information related to the reclamation of those gravel extraction areas and how they were going to be handled, as well as a better plan showing the full extent of those areas. So that's the origin of that. And the applicant, I believe, is prepared to discuss that tonight. If we need a condition of approval related to that, or if the DRB wishes to be a whole lot more specific about the information, the board may want to seek a legal opinion, essentially feeling out the town's ability to require such things of this partially exempted applicant. So as I've noted a couple of times, we do have a applicant that enjoys a partial exemption from Williston's bylaws. This element of the staff report here on page 4 discusses that and goes on to discuss the fact that we are looking at an amendment to an existing discretionary permit. So related to the compost facility, the applicant enjoys the benefit of an existing permit for that facility and is seeking to amend it to permit this expansion. That means that the scope of the review of the expansion of the compost facility under our bylaw is limited to the changes requested by the applicant. In other words, it's not a relitigation of anything the DRB permitted under that prior discretionary permit. We do have access drives on the site. No new drives are proposed. There is internal access proposed in the form of perimeter roads along each side. These are 25-foot roads to allow haul trucks to access the material. And we have had in the past a traffic impact assessment for the development approved as it related to the original approval for the composting facility. At that time, traffic was anticipated to be highly seasonal, cresting during April and May when people are buying compost, and then October and November when people are bringing their yard waste into the facility. With the hours of operation of the facility limited from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., that means we don't have an impact on PM peak hour traffic, which is the busiest hour on the adjacent public road between 4 and 6 p.m. Generally, most of the traffic has already gone before the PM peak hour can begin. We don't have a requirement generated for off-street parking or loading on this site, and no changes in parking areas are proposed. The site is already served with on-site water and wastewater, and no changes to that infrastructure is proposed. We are in a site that is subject to the town's requirements that stormwater be treated and that erosion control during and after construction be provided for. And I have a little more to talk about with that when we get to chapter 29. There are no accessory or temporary structures proposed, as I mentioned before. One can think of the retailing and wholesaling operations on the site either as part of a partially exempted applicant and operation, or you might think of them as accessory. Either way, they can be permitted. We do have some language, and this comes up in the public comment with concerns about odor. Williston's bylaws do address the potential that uses may create nuisance, including odor. And you can see the excerpt of the bylaw there, 18.3.4, what if my development will stink? Rather colorful element of the bylaw there. So what it does suggest here is that if the DRB finds that anticipated odor will not or cannot ordinarily be confined on the property or at least within an industrial zoning district, it may simply prohibit the proposed use. Of course, that ability to prohibit, like all other things, is limited when you're dealing with an applicant who enjoys the partial exemption under state law. The DRB may also, consistent with state air pollution laws, require measures that would mitigate the anticipated nuisance. And then, the bylaw goes on to state that you can't interfere with the intended function of a landfill, which is the term used here, but I believe that statute applies broadly to waste management activities, including composting. So you probably cannot say outright no, as is in the case of most partial exemptions. You probably cannot impose a condition that would make it unfeasible to process compost on the site as the applicant's proposing, but you can still discuss the impact and discuss reasonable conditions that you think might be necessary to mitigate odor. I will note that this is in the industrial zoning east, but there is a zoning boundary up by the edge of the Cirque Highway right-of-way, not too far from this property, and the zoning on the other side is agricultural, rural, residential. In terms of landscaping, there are some existing landscaping buffers on the site with some street trees along Redmond Road and minimum buffers of 50 feet of existing wooded vegetation on other sides. There does appear to be a portion of Redmond Road that has existing vegetation fewer than 50 feet in width that does not provide perfect screening or screening in compliance with the bylaw. The DRB may wish to consider a condition to require some additional screening along Redmond Road where needed to comply with the town's landscape chapter. Similarly, we have a requirement for street trees. You can see a partial street tree section in the aerial photograph on my site, on my screen, as well as a image, drive-by image of some of that sort of screening. the DRB might consider in places along the road where it doesn't have that kind of screening, it might consider requiring it as a condition of approval. Returning to the discussion of conservation areas, this site is within a significant wildlife habitat area, which is a resource type that's mapped in the Williston Town Plan and in the bylaw. And the designation here is Core Habitat Wildlife Travel Corridor. And there are some exemptions to those protection standards that are applicable to this project because it's an expansion of an existing facility within 150 feet of the existing facility. The proposed expansion plan will increase the compost management area from 8.6 acres to approximately 13.3 acres, which is less than 100% of the existing site. And the proposed expansion is going to occur over a previously cleared area that was formerly used in the sand and gravel extraction process. So that means those exemptions to Williston's conservation area protections in the bylaw are applicable to this proposed project, and means that the project does not require the submission of a habitat disturbance assessment. Additionally, the recent tree clearing related to the gravel mining on the site has really compromised the integrity of the wildlife travel corridor. And the applicant has provided a phasing plan and reclamation plan for the site in this application. The Conservation Commission looked at this. They felt generally satisfied that over time the site will reforest, although there were some concerns about potential infestation of invasive species. Invasive plant species often do really well in disturbed areas unless they're sort of managed and outcompeted by natives. And again, the town may find that it's a little bit at its limits in dealing with a partially exempted development in terms of requiring much more in the way of reclamation than is already proposed by the applicant. We do not have any of this project area in a flood zone. Back to watershed health for a minute. There are two elements to protecting watershed health related to this project. One is that the project is proposing enough disturbance that an erosion protection and sediment control plan is required. And that would need to be part of the final plans. We do have that plan in draft here in the discretionary permit. It appears that it generally complies with the standards. That was also the concurrence of the Conservation Commission. We do have stormwater infrastructure on the site and some proposed changes to that to continue to treat stormwater on the site. We have no Class 2 wetlands, a few unmapped Class 3 wetlands, and we do have a 50-foot buffer to an unnamed stream on the site. Conservation Commission has recommended a condition that no development be allowed or disturbance be allowed within that 50-foot buffer, and you'll see that in the draft conditions. There is some existing outdoor lighting on the parcel. It complies with the town's lighting chapter 24, and there is no new outdoor lighting proposed. In terms of signage, the applicant is proposing some changes to their signage out there. These changes are relatively small. There is a freestanding sign proposed. The staff report notes that the base of that sign in compliance with Williston's requirements would need to be landscaped. And that there might be a need to swap out some of the existing sandwich boards in order to permit for that sign, or submit an application for approval of a master sign plan to allow the use of both those boards and the freestanding sign. And I will note, if memory serves, I think there is an existing master sign plan for this site, so it would probably just need to be amended. In terms of impact fees, this proposed project is exempt from paying impact fees because the applicant is CSWD. I will note that in the case of a commercial application like this, the only applicable fee would be the transportation impact fee, which is based on PM peak hour trip ends. If there were no additional trip ends to be produced by this expansion, the fee would be zero anyway. So staff has prepared for you a draft decision, including findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval. Those are our standard conditions of approval all the way up through condition number 20, which you see at the top of your page right now. Conditions 21 through 24 deal with some of the things I discussed tonight, including the requirement for some additional street trees and landscape screening along Redmond Road, the landscaping for the signs, and the need to adjust master sign plan or exchange signs in order to keep the sign total within the town's limits. And I will stop there and I will stop screen sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Good job. Okay. At this point, we'll turn it over to the applicant to add anything that you feel is relevant and pertinent to your application.
All right, I'll start off. This is Josh Tyler with the Chittenden Solid Waste District. I'm the Director of Operations. I confirm with Matt's statement, we do have a master sign plan and we can adjust it as necessary. We'll work with Matt and staff. To address the trees, Vermont Gas came through and put a production gas line through Redmond Road, and that's where those trees went. So we can work with staff, but that little area, there is a 36-inch gas line underneath it, so we wouldn't be able to plant there, and then it goes right into our stormwater. So we're open for discussion on that, but that's where those went. And then
Hey,
just
Josh,
to give a
Josh, this is Scott Riley for 1 second. Just can I ask a quick question?
yeah, absolutely.
Before you get into the individual areas, could you that were recommended or talked about by the staff, could you just give us a thumbnail sketch of how the operation is going, the history over the past, say, 5 years, the growth you've experienced, the growth you're going through, and just tell us how you're doing and what you're experiencing and what you're expecting.
Absolutely. Would that be appropriate to share my screen at this point? Because I can give you kind of an overview of the entire site and walk you through all those, just give you a kind of a general overview of where we're at and where we're going.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Let's see. Ooh. See if I can do that. Share request. All right. Let's bring this up again. Let's see. I want to get to this one. This is the one I have. So I'm talking myself through this. Overall, though, hopefully you guys can see this. Let me know if you can. Okay, hopefully it's loaded. It's a big one. I'll zoom in a little bit. Let me know when you can see it.
I did make you co-host, so you should have screen share capability, but we're not.
Yeah, and I just shared it. I'm hoping it picked up. Share. All
There
right,
we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Okay. So let me just orient you. This is the north arrow. Here's Redmond Road along here. This is the Global Foundries property, and then the Winooski River is up here. So our primary entrance or first entrance is here. Our second entrance is here. When we receive food waste to compost, it happens here. This is where our phase 1 and phase 2 composting take place. That's really to meet our solid waste requirements and a lot of our permit requirements. Once we go through this, which is roughly between 4 and 6 weeks of composting, we screen our material and we move it to our existing curing area. What we've decided to do with Act 148 kind of picking up speed at this point is we've identified that we've got a loading area in this zone right here, which is actually adding to congestion with more people coming in and dropping off food waste or leaf and yard waste. And so what we're doing is deliberately developing an area where we can have windrows here. And then over here, we're going to have a blending and sales area. So we'll be pulling all the large truck traffic out of kind of the public area and bringing them into our third entrance over here, which is the Heinsberg Sand and Gravel entrance. And they'll come in along here and they'll be loaded this way. So we're not changing really any of our primary operations up here. But what we are doing is that we are going to a windrow turner and windrowing, which is just a pretty large operational change, and it requires that we need more space to lay down our windrows. And for anybody who doesn't know what a windrow is, it's roughly like a gigantic bread loaf. So it's about 18 feet in width and about 8 feet tall. And what we have now is a windrow turner that goes through that and turns it over. And so the reason we're doing this is because we're looking for operational efficiencies. Part of our mission is to manage solid waste in an environmentally friendly fashion, but also in an economically friendly fashion. And so this optimizes our operations moving forward and probably for the next 20 years. So we're seeing optimization in the sense that we historically had turned our piles with an excavator with an inverted bucket, which took roughly 10 days to 4 weeks. And we can turn these windrows in roughly 4 to 8 hours. So that's the optimization we're seeing. But in doing this, we want to make sure that our entire site is a year-round site because, you know, when it gets really wet, we do have concerns. So we're actually going to raise it up a little bit, and we're building run-on and run-off stormwater controls. And we're exceeding our run-on control requirements by the state just because we don't want water onto our site. So we're going to channel it around. And then same with our sales and blending area. This is the area where we're going to make 3 of our products. Last year, we shifted our operational model from a retail sale and commercial bulk sale to bulk sale only. And we shifted from selling 12 products to 3. Again, that's more of an efficiency piece and an economic viability piece. And so in doing that, we're going to have laydown space here for the 3 blended products we're going to work through. And then we're going to have loading areas here as well. So the entrance roads into this are roughly 25 feet wide. On our windrowing area, they're 30 feet wide because we have to turn our windrow turner around, which has a width of 18 feet. We're also reducing the amount of equipment we have out here. So we had 2 trommel screens, we had an excavator, and then over here we had a mixing tub. With the windrow turner, it kind of takes the place of all of those, except for we have 1 large Comtech screener that we're going to move out here, and we're going to screen product out here. We're currently in conversation with Green Mountain Power looking to get 3-phase power out here so that we don't have to use diesel. And in doing that, that would pretty much make that machine silent. It's not very loud. It's the generator that makes the noise. So really, that's the kind of the basics of what we're looking at is we're trying to clear up kind of the public area by moving our loading zone to here. We've optimized our process by purchasing a windrow turner and then moving our screener out here. And then as far as stormwater goes, we've got infiltration trenches along the back boundary of both these proposed pads. And those will collect clean stormwater and they'll push them through to a stormwater spreader down here, which will meet this ephemeral drainage that goes into Redmond Creek. But the idea is to really try to infiltrate all the clean stormwater right off the bat so that we don't have really any effect down here. We have, historically, we've proposed this French drain here. We still have it in our plans, but we're not 100% sure we want to put that in yet, just because we've got such a robust stormwater system that we're putting into place. Anything that comes off of our windrow pad will then be collected in an infiltration trench here and then directed to a sediment forebay in our stormwater structure. That'll slow all water down coming in, and it's also designed for infiltration. And then any water that overflows out of our forebay will go into our collection pond. In the event we see, you know, we're designing to a 10-year storm, but because this is a sand pit, our HydroCAD models indicate that we won't really see any runoff at all in a 10-year storm. But we're also designing in the event we see a 50 or 100-year storm, because we want to make sure that we're controlling the water on and off the site, because we've got open product here that's curing or it's ready for sale. So in the event we have an overflow event, it'll go over an overflow pipe, and then it will be put in with the existing run-on stormwater for just a dilution effect, and then hit the spreader as well. And one thing to point out is off of our windrow pad, we're going to put these treatment berms in. So as material goes into our infiltration swales, if it starts to accumulate and move on the surface of the swale, it'll have to go through a series of treatment berms to knock down any sediment or any BOD or any particulates to keep the water as clean as possible. So that's kind of the basics of our stormwater plan. And really the overall concept of this is we're not going to increase traffic, because the same amount of trucks that are coming over here will be coming in here. We're not going to increase really our production of compost per se. We've identified that we can be successful and maintain our operations economically and environmentally if we cap ourselves around 5,000 to 6,000 tons of food scraps in. With Act 148 coming into play, we will most likely be back to you with, once we exceed our self-imposed capacity. That's a conversation coming down the road, but I want you guys to be aware that we will come back to you with that. But that's the basics right now. If there's any operational or siting questions, let me know.
So what does that volume that you just forecast? I think you said 5 to 6 tons.
5 to 6,000 tons.
5 to 6,000 tons per year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how does that equate to volume, say a year ago?
So we've we lost a major contract. They were going somewhere else, so we were pushing the 6,000, 6,500 ton capacity amount, and with that loss, we're hovering around 5,000 right now, give or take. We anticipate this coming year we'll hit 5,000, maybe 5,200, and then the following year 5,500, and the year after that we'll be pushing that 6,000 ton capacity. There is a potential for another facility to come online to manage some of those tons, and we are also considering how to manage those tons through our facility as well.
Another facility on site.
We are looking at the potential for a facility on site. We're in
Okay.
negotiation right now to see if that even makes sense to do.
Okay.
Really, the two options to meet our mission and Act 148's requirements is to either treat it on site and send it somewhere as a treated product, or to truck it to a place that can treat it. So those are the two we're looking at. Our mission doesn't fulfill our mission, I guess, to aggregate the material and to send it somewhere. It makes more sense for us to process it on site and send it out. And again, once we have more information regarding that, we'll definitely be in touch with you. And I've been in touch with Matt about those potentials as well.
Can you address the issue of odor and smell that the board seems to have gotten some inquiries and comments around that?
Yeah, so it's a different creature every time, and I maybe have Dan jump in on this soon. Dan Goosen, he's our director of compost, but historically we've had a couple pieces of key equipment go down for a long period of time, which then when you're not processing the way you're supposed to has led to odor. That's why we're kind of expanding out to get a windrow turner and to focus on one screener and only 3 products. That's one piece. The other piece is that we can successfully mitigate odor in the 5,000 to 6,000 ton range. And that's where we identified ourselves being. As we increase or start to see more of that material, that's when we're going to go into that next phase of planning, whether or not we process it on site through a different technology or send it away. Dan, do you have any inputs from that?
Sure, yeah. Dan Goosen, Director of Composting for CSWD. And just to give a little background, we've been at this site now for 10 years. When we first got the approval to build out, when we relocated from Burlington, many of you are aware of that. But as is the case with all compost facilities, odor is kind of one of the more sensitive issues, as you can imagine, but just by the nature of the materials we're processing, manures, putrescent food, there is potential for odor, unpleasant odors to escape the facility, particularly given that most compost facilities are in the open air environment. And so there's always a baseline earthy smell for any of you who have taken advantage of the food waste drop-off or the yard waste drop-off, which I expect many of you have. You're probably familiar with, as you drive onto the facility, generally you can smell what smells like compost. We hope that it's usually, almost all the time, just that's an earthy smell. Hopefully smells better than what might be in your backyard if you get too close to your compost pile. but occasionally there are things that do trigger some others, less desirable smells, such as the equipment breakdown that Josh was referring to. Another issue is we have an underground tank that collects leachate, our more stronger liquids, and ironically during low precipitation periods where that is just a very low level of liquid for months at a time, things tend to fester in there a little bit, and then when they finally get pulled out, there's generally a more potential for release. And so we try to plan very carefully when those have to occur. They don't happen very often. But in the few odor notices that we've gotten from neighbors over the past several years, they've almost all been related to that when we've been pulling liquid from our underground tank. And then the wind changes direction and then we get the call. I did read the comment from our neighbor up on Ledgewood, and it's good to know that there has been a lot of trees that have been removed from the two projects that were referenced. And certainly trees do provide buffer. We historically have had a very good, we've been very lucky that we've had a nose up on that hill in the Ledgewood neighborhood. Historically, there was a commissioner on our board who lived there and was able to let us know if they had any increase in odor, which wasn't very frequent, but it's something that we've missed. They're no longer in town. They've relocated. So we're without that nose on the hill. So I think it's really helpful for us to hear when there are odors that might be abnormally, offensive, because we might not notice them. As you can imagine, being close to the stuff all the time, our noses are perhaps less sensitive. So our general request to everybody we talk to in our community is that they let us know if they do notice an increase in odor, beyond that background earthy smell. But with the expansion that we're talking about, as Josh mentioned, our aeration system is quite robust on the front end of our process, and that really does a good job at, as soon as those putrescent materials come in, as soon as they're blended, everything is covered with a biofilter, and it does a phenomenal job at retaining potentially bad odors. I had one more thought about that, and it's escaping me at the moment, but I think we will be paying very close attention to odors moving forward, certainly as we do this expansion. And actually with the expansion, that's where I was going to mention, as Josh mentioned, it takes us a very long time currently and every year since we've been at the facility to turn over our entire field of curing compost. With the advent of the windrow turner and the space to operate it, we will be able to turn our piles much more regularly, which we believe will increase their oxygenation and should decrease the potential for odors accumulating within those piles as well. So that should all be to the good.
So would you forecast that if you were to do a little scientific forecast and say a year ago, odor levels are at a certain level, and I realize they fluctuate over time. I heard that loud and clear. And then you increased volume, but you've got new technology. And what do you forecast, on the odor going forward with the increased volume, but new technology?
Right. Well, as Josh mentioned, we plan to be within what we feel is our ability, the tonnage that will allow us to control odors very well for the next few years. Beyond that, as the tonnages increase, we recognize that we would need to reach out and figure out another solution for additional tonnage. So that's what we'll be coming back to with. But for the 5,000 to 6,000 tons that we're talking about now, we feel like we're we should have no problem maintaining the same odor controls that we have for the last many number of years. It's a very similar amount to what we've been handling for the last 2, almost 3 years. It's double the amount of food waste that we were handling when we opened the facility 10 years ago. So we have seen dramatic growth over those last 10 years. However, as Josh alluded to, a large generator of food waste was actually lost now a year and a half ago. And since then, we've been in much better shape, and has given us the capacity we need to buy us the time to make this expansion and those improvements. And we believe that by the time the big influx comes down the road, that we will have other technologies in place and other partners that'll help figure out additional tonnages.
So overall, I guess, yeah, baseline will stay the same, and that, we're really going to implement the potential for a better odor control in the curing area, because we're going to have the piles turned more often and more porosity in them, so they'll aerate better.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Say, Pete, can I follow up with a question on this?
Absolutely.
So the windrow turner that you're speaking about, is that a piece of equipment that you currently own and are currently using?
Yes, we purchased it earlier in probably the late spring. We received a grant from the A&R. As Act 148 came out, they identified that there would probably need to be some funding put out there for anybody who is composting. So we purchased it. We've received a version of the one we want, but with COVID, the one we want is still across the Atlantic. So we're waiting for that. We're hoping to receive our long-term one coming shortly, but it's been up and running for, I don't know, Dan, 4 weeks now, 3 weeks?
3 or 4 weeks, yep.
Yeah.
Is there any way to, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to follow up on the comment that this is an electric machine.
The windrow turner is not. It's a diesel fuel powered machine. The screener. So we went from a good number of pieces of equipment down to really primarily 2. We do have our loaders that move the material, but the major operational pieces of equipment that we use now are the windrow turner, which is run by diesel. It's not very loud, and then our screener, and our screener is pretty big. We currently run it off. We were running it off a generator, but the generator hasn't been cooperating lately, so we're actually moving 3-phase power to its existing spot and running it that way, and that has reduced the sound on that one significantly. So those are the two major operational pieces of equipment we use.
Okay, all right. I was curious what you were doing with 3-phase, and so 3-phase replacing the generator and powering the screener.
Correct.
Got it.
So to follow up on my question, have you noticed any difference then in odor on the site since you started using that piece of equipment?
So the windrow, I was just gonna say, the windrow turner uses that we are able to do thus far are fairly limited. It has 3 primary uses as we're envisioning them. However, the last 2 uses are going to be dependent on us actually doing this expansion. So we are still turning our windrows with an excavator, for instance. The primary, and that is the primary function of the windrow turner, is to turn windrows for curing compost. We're going to be replacing the mixer, as Josh described, on the front end of our process, which is, right after you blend all the inputs and you start the aeration process. Before you start the aeration process, you have to actually mix them very well together, make a homogeneous blend, and that we've already replaced the mixer with the windrow turner. So that's for those of you who've seen our site, there's a 1 acre concrete pad, and we do a very short run, and it does a phenomenal job at blending that material. I don't believe there's any extra odor release there. The material is blended and put right into the aeration bays, capped with the cover, and then the fans are turned on. So I think it's still early for us to see the real benefit of that in terms of odor. But we are very happy to have it on site, and we are seeing other benefits of it already.
Okay.
Any other members of the DRB have questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'll take another stab here. This is John. I recognize that your hours of operation are coordinated very nicely with the peak PM timeframe. As you become more, as your volume increases and whatnot, is there any chance that you would be looking to increase those hours?
Not that I can say. No, that's not the plan, to tell you the truth. We definitely want to stay out of those peak PM trips. And right now, receiving material from commercial haulers, we're a couple trucks a day, coming in, and maybe, in our busiest part of the year, a couple trucks a day going out. So we'll move the trucks going out to that sales area, but as things ramp up, I don't see us expanding our hours. Dan, do you have?
No, I mean, the beauty of CSWD is the full network of drop-off centers that are located throughout the county. So still the majority of the materials coming into our facility are coming through those channels. There's a little bit of interruption there early on during COVID when everything was shut down. And as you're aware, things took a while to open back up. But at this point, most of the materials coming in are not directly through car trips on Redmond Road, rather consolidated loads coming through one of the hauler trucks. And those, there has been some increase in the hauler trucks for sure, but it hasn't been, certainly it's not a doubling yet. And usually what happens with those is the haulers, as they start out, even the small ones, have a very small vehicle and make more trips. And then as they grow in size, then they consolidate and they get larger vehicles. And we've seen that with all of the haulers up to this point. So I think we perhaps even maybe at the peak in terms of hauler trips, and that may consolidate further as those companies grow. Bigger trucks, less trips.
Yep.
Josh, could you give us again, a quick thumbnail sketch of what's going on with the gravel operation?
Yeah, I can give you a quick overview. I think even this particular, what I'm looking at here has it. So we, for Act 250, we knew that we were going to move into this area. We knew that it wasn't permitted. So we went through Act 250 and, we worked on a phasing plan. So the current phasing plan for the sand extraction, you can kind of see it right where my cursor is. This is phase 1 here. And actually it extends, I think, out to here. And I do have a phasing plan, but it's I can just show you right here. So that's phase 1. Heinsberg Sand and Gravel is finishing up on phase 1. They aren't done yet, and I don't know if they can give me a time frame because they haul when they need it. They're not hitting it very hard. The next phase is right here. This is phase 2. So this is the next spot they'll be. And that coincides with the removal of trees. So this is the next section he'll go into and he'll start extracting sand from. So that's where it looks. And then from phase 2, there's another phase 2 over here. Then it goes into a phase 3, a phase 4, phase 5, and then a phase 6 back here. And if anybody on the conservation committee is on this call, my estimate for how long our court settlement was for mineral extraction, I said between 20 and 25. We actually double checked our permits after that. There's 19 years left of sand extraction out here by court order.
So it appears like there's a pretty significant amount if they chose to use it.
If they chose to use it, correct. I mean, we own the land, they own the mineral rights, for the, to put it simply. So we're working with them because they didn't, as a grandfathered quarry, there weren't a lot of requirements, and we knew that we were going to start moving in. So we started, wrapping this place into, meeting permitting standards and requirements.
Okay.
Other members of the DRB, do you have any questions?
Josh, can you show us, this is John, can you show us where that unnamed stream is and where the 50-foot buffer is? There's so many lines on this plan, I was having a hard time finding that.
It's an overall plan, but there's a lot on it. So can you see where my cursor is right here?
Absolutely.
Yep, that's where they define it. This is an ephemeral drainage that comes through here, and then it follows along onto Global Foundries and then goes down into Winooski. So that's what was identified as a 50-foot buffer. It doesn't get in the way of our existing expansion. We do have some laydown space up here that we'll have to address, but that's not really active up here. You know, we're kind of shifting things to go this way.
Great. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else, John, or you good for now?
No, I think we've addressed the stuff on my list here.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the DRB?
I'm good.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up to members of the community. When I look at the roster listing here of Zoom participants, it appears like there's several members of the community that are present. Do any of you want to address the board or ask a question? And if you do, please state your name and your address for the record, please.
Yes, this is Terry Lambert. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good evening, Terry.
Yes, so Terry Lambert, my address is 1166 Ledgewood Drive. And so I'm also the president of the Martel Hill HOA. So generally speaking, the HOA and our property line abuts CSWD on the east and the south side of the property that Josh was sharing. And I understand that CSWD, be it Josh or other members, have received some inquiries, or Dan, with regard to complaints, predominantly of the odor and odor increases. I can tell you that I have received some, and other board members have received some complaints and inquiries with regard to the odor. Most specifically, a noticeable increase with the recent tree clearing. And as a result of that tree clearing, there has been an increase in odor, respectively, as well birds that tend to be a challenge there as well. So with that clear cut, it has increased the concerns from residents here with regard to increase in odor. We've even had some new residents, because we've had some turnover here in the neighborhood, that don't have a history of being here, that made comment with regard to odor and was inquiring as to what the odor was. So with this increase in odor, and that's prior to this new permit, we're very concerned with regard to the neighborhood on increased potential for odor, any birds, and any, as a result of that, certainly the corresponding effect on life, their lifestyle, their well-being within the neighborhood. And noticing that there will be an increase in the influx of waste that's coming in, and the haul roads, as I think Josh mentioned, that would be closer to the HOA in the, I think the area that was identified as the sales area. So one concern either with noise of more larger trucks that are closer to butting up to the HOA. Because I think the offset, the abutment requirement is only 9 feet. So we haven't shared all the comments that we received, be it from phone calls or any emails that we've received thus far with CSWD, because we wanted to address them in this forum. But I did want to bring that to your attention. We have received an increased volume of concerns, most specifically noted to odor. And so the residents are very concerned. They're concerned about their well-being, you know, as far as living in the neighborhood, and even as it could potentially affect their property values. So and I understand that you've received some correspondence. I apologize, I haven't seen that correspondence. Would you mind sharing as to the names of the residents that submitted correspondence to the board?
Matt, if you would do that, please, because that's part of the public record.
Sure, I'm going to share my screen just so that folks can see these. And I'll begin with, this is from Lynn, and I apologize for the pronunciation name, Lynn Boar. This was sent to Emily today, or sorry, yesterday. Fear of allowing more smells to come up to Ledgewood Drive. And then we had one other, there we go, from Norm Bro, 698 Ledgewood. And comment I'm going to try to bring up, it was in your packet. This sort of echoes what the board was hearing, concerns that the land clearing on the site is reducing the buffering and increasing the transmission of odors from CSWD up the hill into Ledgewood. And this letter also notes a change in perceived odor following the development of the Velco site also on Redmond Road. And the board may recall that site. It's a fairly large wooded area that was cleared for a storage building and laydown site just up the hill from CSWD. Those are the two written comments that the staff received in relation to this application.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So I guess in general, and I know there are other members, at least one other member here from the board that I'll ask him to speak as well. But at large here, representing the HOA, we're very concerned with regard to the odor and the impact on the neighborhood. We've had neighbors that, like I said, even new neighbors that have moved in that are very concerned, and they're like, what is this odor? Where is this coming from? And so it could have a significant negative impact here on the neighborhood at large. So with that, I'd like to turn over Kevin. Are you still online?
Yeah.
Is there anything, Kevin, you'd like to add or to chime in?
Kevin Fisher, 649 Ledgewood Drive. I'm on the board with Terry Lammer on HOA on Martell Hill. I think the big concern was a kind of a double flex. When you had Velco, that was a big clearing. That really, if you look at it on a map, you pull up Google Maps, you pull up anything, and that right there, I think, has significant impact on kind of how the site kind of relates now to Ledgewood, Ledgewood Drive. As Norm wrote, because Norm's probably the closest woman to, from our neighborhood, that abuts up to the CSWD location, is that with that much clearing that has happened, that buffer has gotten a lot smaller. And I think the fear is that with the more trees and underbrush and everything that gets cleared out, we could have a potential of, having it get even worse. As he said, we've always been good neighbors. I think we've had a good relationship the last few years. As you said, even one of our, we even had a board member, right, with Craig being working with CSWD, but with the tremendous amount of clearing that's happened, I think we've lost some of that buffer. So my concern would be what steps could be taken to help bring back some of that buffer.
Is that a question that we should be addressing?
Well, I'm asking, because that was, you look at a map, that was a big clearing. I don't think people realize how big a project that was going to be. It looks like it just never stopped. I mean, they just kept clearing and clearing and clearing. And you pull up a Google map, you pull up, that's a big area. It's a big area.
Right.
Look at that. Look at the difference.
Yes. So unfortunately, we don't own that property. a right of way through CSWD.
Right. That's why I said it kind of affected it. That's why I'm saying it. Again, you know, I know you do not own the property, but I'm just saying when you take when you look at that, that's a lot of terra firma. That's a lot of leaves.
For sure.
So I think the concern is, as you see a project like that happens, and then you hear about more expansions, how much more of that buffer is going to be taken away. And I think that's really, you know, when you look at the landscape, that's, I think, a big, that's the big, I think that's a big concern. I think that was a big note when you look at Norm. You know, that was a big concern for him.
Sure. Yeah. So for better or worse, I believe the tree clearing associated with the gravel pit, the sand removal is done. They did it all at once. You know, so in terms of the trees between our facility and the Ledgewood neighborhood, the remainder of those trees are, I believe, you know, they're either the right of way for the road that likely won't be built, or they are on CSWD property. And correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but there's, you know, even if I don't think there's going to be any plans for any more tree removal on our behalf, and we're the only other property owners there. You know, I believe the Heinsberg Sand and Gravel are up to their edge of their Redmond sand, as it's called, and therefore all that tree removal is done on that side of the road. Is that right?
Yes and no, because there is a final phase there, phase 6, which would
5 and 6.
Yeah, which would move closer towards the Ledgewood property. We have no plans, you know, on CSD doesn't have any plans to clear any more, to clear any trees. For the most part, there's some, you know, as far as our future construction goes. I think we're putting in where we were proposing here, and that's as far as we're going.
This is Terry. I apologize. Whoever was sharing the screen with the map, would you mind sharing that again? So we did have obviously the clearing that happened with Velco, but there was additional clearing that was still conducted by CSWD, correct? Down closer to, if you can move your cursor now to the right, down a little bit to the right, lower. Apologize. I guess it would be on the, if that's oriented north, then on the southeast area of the property that you did some clearing, correct?
That was cleared for sand extraction for Heinsberg Sand and Gravel's mineral rights.
Right. And many of the, as Kevin alluded to, many of the inquiries that we received from the board here was an increase in odor when some of that buffering went away. And so that is obviously a significant concern of the residents for any of the winds that happen to come from, you know, prevailing winds coming from the north or northwest that would now carry greater into the property line. Both Lynn, Norm, new residents that have been referenced are on the northwest side of the HOA.
Right. Yeah. So I can say that, you know, our process should improve in terms of odor release as we develop this and are able to aerate our piles moving forward. The way we do it now is material goes through our aeration process and then is stacked up and waits to be screened. That's where backlog can happen, and occasionally, you know, compost related odors can occur, and that will all go away when we do the windrowing process, because the screening will happen at the tail end rather than the front end of the windrowing process. So that should be a huge improvement. And by capping the amount of food waste that we are planning to compost moving forward, we think that we should easily be able to limit odors back to kind of normal levels, apart from the occasional equipment breakdown that have occurred over the last couple of years. When we first started dealing with or thinking about how to deal with Akron 48 and the increase of food that we anticipated, we had looked at plans on composting all of it. And our board backed off of those plans. So I think that's good news for you as our neighbors, because compost, we will continue to try our best to make sure that whenever we know that there's offensive odors being released, that we try to find the source of it and make corrections. But inherent with making compost, there are some potential for odor release. And the more you have, as you can imagine, the more odor release. So by capping it at the 5,000 to 6,000 tons processed on site, we don't anticipate increases in odor. If anything, they should be decreasing over time as we build out the rest of our site and are able to enact those improvements with the process.
So Dan, I know you and Josh talked about it a little bit. Can you estimate when you would anticipate those capital improvements for odor mitigation to be in place?
That is a great question. We are actively investigating that right now. The current plan for best management practice for the optimization of this expansion, once the approval happens and the expansion takes place, we're looking to build out the plan that I had showed in October. There's no asphalt or concrete work, so we can work up to when it gets cold. That's our step one. The next step is, as we approach an exceedance of our sweet spot, that 5,000 to 6,000 tons, we're going to be looking to coming back to the DRB to look at processing features for the rest of that material. And odor will be the paramount concern at that point, because we don't want to exceed the amount that we can actively compost. So the processing technology will be extremely important. The ability to suppress odor through that processing technology will be extremely important. And one of the things we're looking at is how to decrease the potential odor from that underground storage tank Dan had referenced. And that would probably be piping that material to a processing facility that was indoors that had some pretty robust odor control. So right now we're working through that. I think we have about a year plus before we hit our capacity, or I guess before we start pushing our sweet spot. So we would and will come back with the next phase of this approach. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It gives me so we can share with the community a basic timeline. I know it's not hold you tight to the timeline, but some basic parameters of when you might expect those capital improvements.
Yep. And yeah, like I said, 12 months minimum, and we're hoping to stick to that, but we'll come back with as we flesh things out more.
Okay. And I just one more question, and I don't know if this is a question more for the DRB or for CSWD folks, with regard to capacity and or throughput. Does it require a permit or an amendment in order to increase beyond the 6,000 tons? Or is that something that CSWD can do just based on your own internal operations?
We actually have multiple permits. We also have a solid waste permit through Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation that caps the amount of material we can run through the facility. And that incorporates all leaf and yard waste, food scraps, wood chips, manures, anything. So if we are to expand past those criteria, we would have to go to the state, we'd have to come to the town, because it would be a production change at our scale. We don't anticipate that with this expansion.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, I apologize. I was just asking a few follow-on questions. I don't know if you have any more, if there's other folks from the community.
No, I'm good, Terry. As I said, my concern is, with the tree situation, I just think that, at one point in time, I think you should start knocking down all the trees in between us, that's where it's going to get worse.
Okay, when I look at the listing of participants, I do not see anyone other than Terry and Kevin from the general public. Am I missing somebody? Is there somebody else out there that I don't have visibility to?
I think that's everyone.
Okay. Terry and Kevin, are you satisfied with your questions at this point?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with the answers to questions. I do again want to reemphasize the concern that the residents have with regard to the odor and the possible negative impact on their well-being. They're just not smelling that stuff on any daily basis, and the potential that it could have even on property value. So I just want to restate that, Pete.
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. DRB members, are there any further questions for the applicant?
Yes, Pete, I was just wondering, Josh, you were talking about the liquid product that you put in a tank, and it sometimes in low rain situations can emit odors. Have you looked at any shorter term mitigation measures that you might be able to put in place before the year when you hope to be able to move that inside?
The one potential we can do is just manage the volume of the tank so it doesn't get super low and stinky. So we could remove material out of it more often. Dan, do you have any kind of thoughts just offhand?
Yeah. So part of the odor buildup that occurs is actually through the solids that are suspended when they're in solution, and then when they get in the tank, they settle and accumulate. One way to decrease the buildup of odors is to make sure that those solids don't build up more than they might over time. And so there's two drains graded drains on our pad that feed to that tank. There's measures that we're putting in place to decrease the amount of solids that go into those drains. So that should help. Also, this past year we hired a wastewater hauling company. You're familiar with P&P as well as Hardigan, or some of the local ones that have been used in the past, where we can use their Vector trucks. We hire them out and they can do a full clean out of an underground tank very efficiently in less than a day. There's a little bit of risk with some odor release as they're doing it. As you can imagine, they actually pump water in and then they pump it back out, and it can be a potential release day of. But then once that happens, we're back down to basically empty tank, and that buys us a lot of leeway in terms of those solids building up again and creating more of that odor. So that's something that we intend to keep practicing. It had been several years since we had brought them in to do that, because we have our own pump truck that does that generally on a daily and weekly basis, but this one's much stronger and it does a better job. So we budgeted to do that more regularly now. So that should help.
Yeah, thank you. And my other comment, Pete, was probably for the neighbors here. There was a comment made about birds, and I didn't really understand that in terms of how this was affecting the birds, or whether the birds were affecting the odor or their lifestyle.
This is Terry. I'll pass on what was passed on to me. Is that with the odor and or potential access to whether it's scraps or whatever, I assume that is bringing in birds. So that's I'm relaying what has been brought to my attention from residents. So I can only assume that that's the case, John.
And birds, I'm assuming that you mean seagulls.
Well, and or crows, etc.
Yeah.
Now, I've noticed since March, when everything's been kind of different, there've been a lot more of each at my house as well. All right, that's it, Pete. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions from DRB members?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, Steve, you good? Okay. Paul, are you good?
I'm recused.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that. You had mentioned that. Okay. Are there anything else? Is there anything else that the applicant would like to bring forth, or the neighbors that would like to bring forth at this point?
If there's any additional information you need from us, just let us know and we can provide it if there's anything missing.
Okay. DRB members, is there anyone who opposes closing this hearing? Okay, hearing none. We're going to close DP 10-34.4 at 8:41. Thank you all for attending and for your comments, and for, Terry and Kevin for your public input. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So that completes the public hearing portion. So we are now going to transition to deliberations. And Emily, if you would do what you need to do to transition us into deliberations, that would be appreciated.
Sounds good. So for the public attendees, the board's going to go into deliberations and it's TBD on when they'll come back. So you're welcome to hang out in the waiting room. You could also call us tomorrow to hear about the decision.
Town of Williston Development Review Board, Tuesday, August 25th. It is 9:14 p.m. We have just come out of deliberative session. Is there a motion for DP 21-01 Next Generation?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, David Turner, move the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of August 25th, 2020, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for DP 21-01, and approve the discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval for these plans from staff, and then seek administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based.
Thank you, Dave. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Scott?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Dave Turner?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so unanimous, motion carries. Is there a motion for DP 10-34.4, please?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, Scott Riley, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory board, boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of August 25th, 2020, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for DP 10-34.4 and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval of these plans from staff, and then seek an administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based. We are making one additional change to condition 21. The condition will read, where feasible, additional street trees shall be planted along Redmond Road, fronting the existing development so as to meet the standards of WDB Chapter 26.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds it. Any further discussion? Roll call, yay or nay. Scott?
Yay.
I'm a yay. Dave Turner?
Yay.
John? You're muted.
I don't know how that happened, but sorry about that. That was a yay.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
For those of you who can't lip read.
Yay.
Paul?
Doesn't apply to me.
Paul recuses himself. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, so there's 5 A's, no nays, 1 recusal, motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of August 11th, 2020?
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting of August 20th, 2020 as submitted.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Any further discussion? Let's go around. Scott?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Dave?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, 6 ayes, no nays, unanimously approves. Okay, next up is to go back into deliberative session to discuss the U-Haul application. Dave Turner and I are going to recuse ourselves from this discussion. Dave, because he was not present for the most recent hearing, and I'm recusing it because of a conflict of interest business-wise. So with that, Emily, if you could put Dave and I into the waiting room, and the rest of you have a good deliberation. Appreciate your support.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Pete.
Aye.